The legend of Peter Niers is not as famous as the stories of Vlad the Impaler or Elizabeth Bathory. Yet the darkness surrounding his name feels far deeper. It is the story of a man born into a world of misery and hatred, a man shaped by violence until he became something no one could understand. Some believed he was a sorcerer or a cannibal. Others whispered that he could transform into animals and vanish into thin air. But above all, he was the shadow that swept across Europe and left behind fear, silence, and death.
Peter Niers was born in 16th-century Germany into a poor peasant family. It was a time when famine and cold ruled the countryside, when the poor were beaten and worked to exhaustion, when nobles feasted behind castle walls while the peasants watched their children starve. In 1525, the German Peasants War erupted and the land fell into chaos. Castles were burned, monasteries were looted, dead bodies lay in the streets. The world seemed to be collapsing, and no one knew what tomorrow would bring. For a child like Niers, there was no safety, no mercy, no hope, only hunger and pain. And slowly the boy began to learn a single truth, that there are only two kinds of people in this world: those who kill and those who are killed. As he grew older, his heart hardened. He stopped believing in kindness. He stopped believing in forgiveness. Stories say that during those early years he met men who believed in forbidden magic. Others claimed he began hearing whispers in the night, voices promising him strength beyond that of any mortal. Some believed that was the moment when something inside his soul finally broke. When Niers became a grown man, he gathered others like himself, desperate men, runaways, outcasts of society, men who had seen everything taken from them. Together they formed a band of highwaymen who roamed from Alsace to Bavaria, from the Rhineland to northern France. At first they robbed lone travelers, then moving caravans, then villages themselves. Entire hamlets woke up in the morning to find their doors open and silence inside the houses. That was when the whispers began to spread. People said Niers could not be harmed by steel, that bullets passed through him like air, that he could appear in two towns in the same night, that he could turn into a dog or a cat or a goat. In the darkest corners of the land, people believed he had made a pact with something ancient and terrible, and that the proof was the leather pouch he always carried at his side. Inside the pouch were said to be the dried hearts and severed hands of infants, preserved in rituals that no sane man would perform, wrapped tightly so their power would never escape. In those days, the forests of Germany were seen as places where the living world touched the realm of spirits. Hunters spoke of strange noises at night. Travelers swore they heard children crying deep between the trees, and some said that if you listened closely, you could hear a voice calling your name. It was a time when no one dared walk alone. In 1577, Niers was captured for the first time, betrayed by one of his own, tortured until he confessed to 75 murders. But he escaped his cell before he could be executed, and that single event changed everything. Now he was not only a murderer, he was a legend. Priests warned of him in churches. Merchants locked their inns before sunset. Mothers hid their children before darkness fell. And pamphlets began to spread across the German lands telling of rituals in the woods and cannibalistic feasts. Some spoke of candles made from human fat that allowed a killer to pass unseen. Others claimed Niers gained power by consuming the hearts of unborn children. And still, people vanished. For 4 long years, he traveled in countless disguises. In one town, he was a leper. In another, he pretended to be a soldier returning from war. Some claim they saw him in the north on the same day he appeared in the south. He always carried money, 2 loaded pistols and a broadsword that looked ancient and cursed. And then came the year 1581, the year that would end everything. In a small town, Niers stopped at a bathhouse. He undressed and slipped into the hot water, exhausted after years of fleeing. For the first time in a long while, he let the leather pouch out of his reach. But fear travels faster than footsteps. Rumors spread through the town in minutes. The locals demanded the pouch be opened. Inside were the dried hearts and severed limbs of children. Niers was dragged from the bath and beaten before he could take a single step. His death lasted 3 days. On the first day, his skin was torn from his flesh and boiling oil was poured into the wounds. On the second day, his feet were held above burning coals, while his screams echoed through the streets. On the third day, he was tied to the breaking wheel, his bones shattered one by one while the crowd watched in horror. Yet he refused to die. Some whispered that the darkness that had fed him for years was now refusing to let him go. That unseen hands were holding his soul inside his body. Only when the executioner hacked off his limbs did Peter Niers finally stop breathing. Germany was silent. Even now, no one knows how much of his tale is truth and how much is fear twisted over time. How many stories were born from superstition, hatred, nightmares, and grief? How many were born from desperation and the need to explain evil in human form? But one thing is certain. Peter Niers was the nightmare of his age, a child of misery, a man of blood, a shadow that even death struggled to destroy. And his darkness has never entirely faded. Some say it never will. Subscribe to Dark Age Tales, where history never sleeps and never dies.